at this point of time, why we are having this webinar is like the COVID-19 has triggered many changes in our special need children lives. As a result of parents of special need children are struggling, like they are struggled uh, to go through this process. So our parents are finding it difficult to understand what works and what does not work. It's just like another hat for the parents to wear. So Embrace Thought we will help our community people to ask questions with the professionals who can help to overcome their concerns regarding general and behavioral issues. So I would like to welcome our speakers for the day today. This is Dr. Yashaswini Kamaraju, MD, Adult Psychiatry, Fellowship, Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Her educational background is exemplary, bringing along with a wide experiences from the prestigious institute. She has obtained an MD in adult psychiatry and Hennepin County Medical Center, Minneapolis, USA, and a fellowship in child and adolescent psychiatry from Stanford University, California, USA. She is a board certified in psychiatry by American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology, and she has many accolades to her kitty. She has been practicing in Bangalore for many years, primarily catering to the children, adolescent, and women. Currently, she is the director of the Reach Clinic in Kormangla, which was conceived with a vision of integrating physical, social, emotional, and psychological wellness. She is also a founder of the Reach Foundation for the Community Services, non-profit organization which aims to promote mental wellness through prevention, awareness, and community-based interventions. She serves as a consultant and as a teaching faculty to Spastic Society of Karnataka and FAME India. She is actively involved in community awareness program, teacher bar parent training programs, and school consultations. We do have another renowned doctor here, so I'll introduce her. She is Dr. Kavita Bhatt, an pediatrician and pediatric endocrinologist, fellowship in pediatric endocrinology and diabetes. Dr. Kavita has done her MBBS degree from prestigious Kasturba Medical College, Mangalore. She has obtained her MD Pediatrics from Bangalore Medical College. She has obtained her fellowship in pediatric endocrinology and diabetes from Louisiana State University School of Medicine, USA, and she has many posters and publications presented in her name at both national and international conferences. She also works as a guide for thesis presentation. Currently, she is serving as pediatric endocrinologist at Aster RV Hospital, Bangalore. So, welcome you both, Dr. Kavita ma'am and Dr. Yashaswini ma'am. We are very lucky to have you here. Priya, you can take over from here, Priya, please.
Priya, you are on mute.
Thank you for pointing that out. Good afternoon, one and all. Thank you, Dr. Indu. Welcome, Dr. Yashaswini and Dr. Kavita. We are here and for this session on for the special needs children and on this scenario of COVID pandemic. So we are going to jump directly into the questions. And we have a set of questions which you have already received from the parents and caretakers. So I'm going to start reading out the questions, and I will pass on it to the doctors to share their thoughts and their answers about these questions. So can I start with the questions? Is that okay?
Yeah, please, Priya. Go ahead.
So the first one, and which is a very common one, is how do I create the awareness of COVID-19 in children with special needs? So all these children, whatever be their age, the situation is totally changed for more than a year now. and we have not been able to take them out or even for their regular sessions or whatever be their activities, and we know that. So how do we create this awareness for the children, and how to teach, especially if they are very young, how to teach the COVID protocol to children who are very young? These are the first questions which we would like to present to the doctors. Should I first, Dr. Yashaswini, do you want to take this?
We request Dr. Kavita to answer this question. Please advise us.
Okay. So, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, doctor.
So, see, it's not necessary to make them aware of COVID as a disease or try to make them understand the nitty-gritty of COVID, which, small children also don't understand. But what we need to make them understand is a few self-protective behavior, which they need to inculcate in themselves. I think that's enough, because we don't want to create anxiety by telling them all the terrible things that COVID does. It's not going to serve any purpose. I mean, this is what I feel. Like basic things like washing hands, cleanliness, keeping a distance from others, and wearing masks. These are some habits which we can try to inculcate. I don't think it serves much purpose by trying to make them understand what COVID is. I don't know, Yashaswini can say, it can unnecessarily create anxiety, because COVID is a complex disease, and for us to be careful about COVID, we don't need to necessarily know all the terrible things about it. So the fear, I think we shouldn't inculcate, because I don't think that's going to help in any way. But certain routines may have to be inculcated. That is, if we are planning to take them out very often, which may not be the case, they need to see that the person who is in front of them is wearing a mask, and even they are wearing a mask. And if they see that the person who is in front of them is not wearing a mask, or the nose is kind of popping out, they need to maintain at least a meter distance from them, maybe a little longer. So 2 or 3 behaviors is what we need to include, what we need to inculcate.
Understood, doctor. So it's more like teaching some healthy practices to the children, some new healthy practices, and ensure that they follow it, more than talking about it like a disease and trying to scare them about it, right? Or making them more confused.
It's not going to help. I mean, it's not going to serve any purpose, any positive thing. Rather than, we can work on developing in them some healthy habits. That's it.
Right. Dr. Yashaswini, do you want to add anything to this?
I think, as Dr. Kavita beautifully said, it unnecessarily induces fear, and especially in special children, it also depends on their cognitive abilities. And if you're taking children who are non-verbal or children with low cognitive abilities, they cannot express their fears. They cannot express. Some of them cannot even express their needs. So I think talking about it, specifically educating about the virus, is not needed, I think, and especially in younger children. So whereas in typically growing children, let's say a typically growing child, till 5 years, they do not have the language abilities and expressive abilities of the language. So till 5 years, I don't think you need to explain at all. But children above 7 might ask some questions. And if they ask the questions about the virus, you can answer them in an age-appropriate manner, in a language which a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old understands. And the answer should be very simple, to the point, and they don't need to need the whole data about the virus in a complex manner. Whereas typically developing older children, like teenagers, they know a lot because they themselves might Google. When they are asking you questions, probably you need to answer them because they can understand it better. But like Dr. Kavita said, keep the fears down, keep it simple, don't exaggerate it.
Very well explained, doctor. Keep it simple for the children and try to make it age appropriate the way we communicate with them, right? That's true. Moving to the next question. How to help special children practice the use of mask? Okay, so this is also one of a common question. How do we make them use the mask?
To whom is this question directed? To
This is for Kavita ma'am. We thought behavioral, specifically behavioral issues, we will ask Yashaswini ma'am's guidance in the COVID
so
issues.
the mask is also pretty much a behavior. So, I mean, special children, we cannot just, I mean, I'm sure Yashaswini would be the best person to answer this, but from a pediatrician's perspective, a very young child, we break it up in parts. You know, we just don't go and try to shove it on their faces. You know, it's just a game. You just keep the mask in front of them and just encourage them to touch it, feel it, pull the elastic, and then maybe hold it up against their faces. You know, in different steps, we could encourage it, and then we could try it on ourselves, make funny faces, you know, make fun, make it seem fun, and then slowly encourage them to wear it. I think that's the way I would get a child who is reluctant to use it and who is kind of doesn't know what is in it for her or I mean, very apprehensive about wearing masks. This is the way to go about it, I would think. But Dr. Yashaswini may be able to add a few valuable points.
Yeah, I totally agree with Dr. Kavita. It should be more fun-based, like she was saying, more starts off with a game-based and a play-based so that they can utilize it, so that they can start using it without a fear attached to it, especially the younger children. Now, what we see in special children is helping them engage in these practices by repeated rehearsals. Because especially in special children, again, we're talking about different levels of developmental abilities and different cognitive levels. So just explanation will not work even in older children. So like Dr. Kavita said, younger children, it should be more play-based and fun-based, whereas older children, 7 and above, and they need more imitations and more practices. And let's say if we move into autism spectrum children or children with other kinds of developmental disorders, like let's say 10 and above, also they need to be reminded, they need to be supervised, we need to rehearse with them. And the other thing is, since the children have been used to seeing this since last year, it's been 1 year. So what I'm noticing in a lot of children is they got pretty used to it. It is almost becoming a normal environment to them to some extent, because they're seeing these faces always with a mask. So I see some of the special children, in fact, reminding their parents with a mask and, bringing it on a mask the minute they step out. So they've gotten used to it due to rehearse and practice. Because we know with these children, you can, through imitation, through rehearsal and practice, they can learn. However, sometimes you can see some non-compliant behaviors in extremely hyperactive children with developmental disorders, because sometimes because of their hyperactivity and impulsivity, they might throw it, they might remove it. So for those children, it could be harder. But again, given the lockdown, children are not going out. So for the most part, I would say that such children are already at home, because when you in the current situation, taking children out, especially if they're hyperactive and very impulsive, is difficult. So most of these children are at home. So right now we're not having any troubles, but once things open up, probably again we need to work with them on any other behavior. Teaching any form of behavior is difficult for these children. It comes only with practice, supervision, reminders, and repetitive teaching.
Very beautifully said, Doctor. It becomes like another practice which you will have to inculcate in them. As of now, since most of the times we are at home, the scenario where we'll have to wear a mask and move out doesn't occur that often. But when things open up and wearing a mask becomes a regular practice, we will have to inculcate this in them. And just like any other behavior which we want our child to develop, I think the same practice works for this also, the same routine. And putting it in a fun way for the younger ones is Actually, right. That's how they are going to pick it up for sure. Moving on to the next question. Yes, this one is about immunization. So some parents have this question that is it very necessary to get my child immunized as per the immunization chart, or can we wait? And if so, how long can we wait?
Well, there are no guidelines that say that we can wait for immunizations. You know, the COVID guidelines doesn't mention that immunizations have to be postponed. In fact, it's more important to give all the vaccinations on time and protect the child. We shouldn't be postponing any of the vaccinations. Also, administering flu shot, the influenza shot is important because even that is a respiratory virus. And in times of COVID, it may become difficult to differentiate between that and predispose a child to a more severe form of. So it's very important to get the child's annual flu shots also.
Which means we go ahead with our regular chart and take the necessary precautions if we have to step out for that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So that is gives some clarity for the question. Yes. So this is regarding the food habits. Can you please suggest a diet plan for my ADHD child such that he stays calm? I think this parent is referring to this indoor environment, and she's not able to take him out as much as possible. So is there any diet plan she's asking for the ADHD child?
See, I'm not aware of any specific special diet for ADHD, but overall, you know, too much of sweets can cause the child to be a little hyper and agitated. This is what studies have shown, you know. And the other thing is too much of processed foods also is not good for anything, including the mind. So I think avoiding processed foods and sweets and fried stuffs would help a lot. And going back to things like a lot of vegetables, fruits, fresh fruits, vegetables, this is the way to go on. But specifically from ADHD perspective, I'm not sure of any specific diet.
Okay.
Yashaswini ma'am, do you want to add to it?
No, Dr. Kavita is absolutely, right, and she summed it up well. There is no specific diet per se for ADHD at all. And she already mentioned some of the things that have to be restricted and used in moderation.
Thank you.
Yes, so it is generally go for home cooked food and include as much fresh fruits and vegetables, and how much ever the child is tempted and we are also tempted to give in, try to avoid sweets and processed food. That is a reminder for us. Actually, it's a very good practice and it's a good reminder.
See, we can have some healthy snacks. Healthy snacks would be things like nuts or sundal, because nuts have got monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, which are actually the good kind of fats. So we could substitute, say, biscuits, which is nothing but maida and sugar. It's a processed thing, with maybe a bowl of sundal. You can add whatever masala to it, or maybe some nuts and a fruit, or maybe a glass of milk and a fruit. So these are all healthier choices for snacks rather than, or even popcorn, you know, not the ones that comes in sachets. You can make it out of corn yourself with a little bit of oil in the, you know, and it pops. So that's also a high fiber, healthy snack. It's made out of a whole grain. So not the Axe one, which has a lot of oil in it. I wouldn't advise that. But you can make popcorn at home as well, you know, with your kadai or with your with a cooker. So those kind of things are healthier snacks. You can substitute snacks which are like biscuits or chips or some bakery item. You can substitute them for this. And even breakfast, made out of just white rice, you can substitute it with millets. And things like dokla, chila, they are all healthy things, healthy snacks or healthy tiffin options that you could include.
Right, doctor. Right. Yeah, those are some ideas which we could take from for preparing some healthy options for snacks. So the next question, doctors, it is like, how do I set a daily routine for my child in this pandemic situation? There are scenarios like where my child has become very lazy as there is lack of exercise. And how do I motivate my child to do physical exercise? The prolonged stay at home has disrupted the child's food habits. How do I regularize that? So how do I set a daily routine for my child? So these are some associated questions. Who would want to take it first?
See, let me take that question. Setting a daily routine starts with the whole family. It's not just for the child. So when we talk about setting routines, each family has a routine and a rhythm. How does your home starts? And so the same thing, so people inside the home. So it's almost like a family unit. And within the family unit, each one could be having a separate routine. So when we're saying children are getting lazy, they're unable to follow routine, it is also because, it's been too long and children have been at home more than a year. And, everyone is stressed and getting a little irritable. So some of these things are also happening due to what we call COVID fatigue. But even then, it's very, very important to create some kind of a certainty within the uncertain routine. So it's very important for parents to make sure the child has a routine. Otherwise, the whole day would be directionless and clueless. So they need to have a waking time, breakfast time, sleeping time, study time, TV time, play time, fun time. All of these have to be there, sleeping time. Now, usually children drift when they have holidays. It's a very common thing to see. They can't adhere to the same routine that they're used to when they have school or even when they were having physical classes. They could be drifting, but the drift should not be more than 1 to 2 hours. When you have a drift beyond 2 hours, it gets very difficult to get those children back on track again. So you see, we often see child waking up at 6 o'clock during school days. Maybe he's waking up at 8. It is still fine. But now I come to see some children who are waking up directly for lunchtime, waking up at 11 and then missing breakfast. I don't think that should be allowed. So when we're talking about routine, we don't have to be too rigid about them, but at the same time, we need to ensure that there is some routine in place and not completely different from their usual routines. So drifting by 1 to 2 hours is fine. Still keep a very predictable schedule for the child. For younger children, posting it, especially if they're special children, posting it on their doors or on their bathroom door would help. And it also would help visually as well for children with special needs. And even with younger children who are typically growing, schedules will help. And even older children, including teenagers, do need routines in place. They might not follow it, but still some routine is needed because they know that there is an expectation that their day has to go by that. But again, parents also have to understand this is not a perfect time and we can't have perfect schedules. So we can't be very rigid about it, but we need to have some routine. So more or less, a parent needs to be checking in with an older child. Okay, how did your morning go? So what do you have plans for afternoon with an older child like a teenager? If it's a special child, like parents ensure, scheduling is something parents of special needs children are used to. So they anyway monitor the child. So that kind of a monitoring and supervision should go on. So routines, especially predictable routines, are very, very useful. They give a direction, they guide the child so that they're not engaging in any deviant behaviors. And also we can regulate a lot of their social media use. We can regulate a lot of their activities and also ensure some kind of a skill-based learning, including participation in the house regarding chores, helping parents. All the other things are also skill-based learning. So all of those keep continuing.
Wonderful, Doctor. Dr. Kavita, do you have anything to add to this?
No, I think that's it. I think Dr. Yashaswini has covered all the points.
So it's more like having, trying to build in some certainty based on our own family routine, right? So the child who's totally clueless that why things are so different now compared to earlier times, they'll know that in a day, these are few times in a day that these are the things expected from the child.
Yeah, I think mostly, we need to first regulate ourselves as parents. This is what I feel. I mean, even talking about myself, because it's very easy to let go when we don't have too many things to do. But children don't, they will just follow what we are doing. And that's what I think the answer to all these things then comes back to parents most of the time.
Yeah, to ensure that a schedule is in place and to ensure that we are all following it. It's not just.
Like to add here is we need to think of each family also. So because each family can have a different routine. Let's say mom is a homemaker, the routine could be very different. You have families where both parents are working, the routine could be different. And the routine can be different based on the age of the child, if there are siblings, or if there's an extended family. So each family has a routine of their own. So they need to plan what works for them, what works for their child, and how to manage all the routines with so many people being at home. Again, as like Dr. Kavita said, all of this comes back to the parent. So it's almost like a mother being a teacher, counselor, educator, manager, leader, and an individual taking care of herself at the same time. So it's like the Durga avatar with 10 hands is what women are in the current situation, is what I'm hearing, talking to so many families and so many moms, and they're spread out in different ways. It's also actually bringing out a lot of skills in them also, although it can be overloading and exhausting. It's like managing everybody's routines within that house is not a simple task.
True, doctor. It is actually the mother has to ensure that everybody in the house is properly engaged, properly fed at the right time, and also ensure that they are going about their own duties without feeling the trouble on them. Actually, specifically, they are asking if there are any tips if my child is becoming very lazy because of the reduction of activities and exercise. How can I motivate my child? Any specific tips on that? Otherwise, the
lazy, what? We need to think about it. Why is the child lazy, and what are we labeling it as lazy? What is the behavior as lazy? Another thing that I'm seeing is if a child is tired, did not get good night's sleep, or if the child has no predictable routine, wakes up in the morning and is not looking forward to activities, and there's no activity planning or schedule during the day, the child can look tired. So here, and also some children are onto gadgets a lot more. Their sleep could be delayed and they're waking up late. So the whole the whole day is going, is going late. So what is it that laziness? So we need to understand as a parent who was asking that, what do they mean by lazy? Does the child look dull to you, or is the child looking tired, or not sleeping enough, or not interested in activities, or they're not having enough adequate stimulation within the house, or no one to play, no one to interact. So we need to look at how can the parent make the child more interactive? How can you provide more stimulation? How can you think of activities during the day so that you keep the child stimulated and active? And that includes start physical activity of some sort. You have a small backyard, let the child run there. Or, with some children, you can help them, ask them to plant some coriander seeds, go look at that every day. Is it sprouting or not? So you have a small garden, ask them to pluck the leaves, and also ask them to go along with participate in your daily activities, cleaning, sweeping, mopping. Even example, a 2-year-old, if you ask, okay, come, let's clean up the toys and put them in the basket, a 2-year-old can accompany you. A 7-year-old, okay, let me show you how how you can cut the carrots. 10-year-old, okay, bring the washing clothes from upstairs, get it down, engaged him during the course of the day. That is one thing. So physical activity of some sort also will make them active. Okay, we have the, you can't go outdoors. There's a child that I see who runs up and down 20 times the stairs. And he says, ma'am, I'm very active because 20, 30 times that is, I'm going up and down the stairs. That is my physical activity. They can do skipping, and older children, you can make them do squats, jumping jacks. So think of ways to make them active is what I would say. And some children, of course, yoga poses, fun yoga poses younger children would do. But again, older the child gets, it gets little difficult to engage them in physical activity. So with them, you can think of some online aerobics or dance or what are they interested in. So we need to think of those things and design. So a lot of times when parents are asking, what would you suggest for my child? We can't design a template or for all children and apply that to all children. It depends on the child. It depends on the age of the child. It depends on the activities that the child is interested in. It also depends on the family, which can engage in what activities. So think of all of this.
Priya, thank you, ma'am, because it covers lots of questions, other questions also, where they have asked how to engage a small child when both the parents are working, how to engage an adolescent child, and how to engage an adolescent child who is hyperactive. So most of the advice.
Right.
Sorry. When we talk about a young child, see, you were saying both parents are working. How do we manage? The only thing that is different right now is everybody is at home and both parents have to work in that particular scenario. Since the corona started, we are seeing parents are co-parenting. It's no more just the mother. Unless you co-parent, if both the parents have to work in the home environment, there should be co-parenting. And like Dr. Kavita mentioned earlier, a routine and a schedule is extremely important for adults as well. So mom needs to have a posted on the fridge. Dad needs to have his schedule so that your children will know who is available at what time. I am hungry. Is dad free now? Maybe my mom is in meeting. Whom should I ask if I'm hungry or if I want to ask something? So if your routine is predictable, it gets easier. And also prepare your children. Tell them in advance, 1 to 3 o'clock, I'm not available. If you need anything, go and ask your dad. If you prepare them, it helps. Third thing, and prepare in advance. So tomorrow, your day is busy. The day before, you can tell your child if you want, you can do this. And also prepare your child's schedule. 1 to 3, you're busy. Prepare that 1 to 3 of your child's schedule. Okay, I will be busy. Let's say if your dad is also busy, you can call this aunt. She can help you. Or maybe they can talk to a grandparent or they can talk to a cousin. So we have to plan those times. So the more planning, the more predictable it is, and both parents need to co-parent, need to synchronize with each other, and they also need to take breaks. Who can take care of the child till 11 and who can start midway? Because even companies are giving some kind of accommodations due to the corona, because childcare is a big thing. And now that the children are at home, parents have to manage, especially younger children. Of course, older children needs could be different. But with younger children, both parents need to do it together, have breaks, and shift the workload.
Right, doctor. Very beautifully explained. Actually, it covers a wide spectrum of kids. And among all these uncertainties, as much as possible, making at least the within the house experience as much predictable for them is going to help them a lot. That is one bottom line. Yes. Viraja ma'am, should I continue with the questions? Okay. There is another question which asks, will they be able to cope up with this pandemic in the future? Which could mean like, if the current pandemic-like situation recurs again, would my child be able to cope up again and again with this kind of a situation? Or once the pandemic gets over, will my child be able to cope with the earlier normal life situations again? How do I teach my child to cope up with the after effects of the COVID infection? So these are the new scenarios which are now coming up. So how do we cope our child, or how do we train our child, help our child to cope up with all this? Any tips on that?
So, see, the COVID situation is the most unpredictable situation that everyone is facing. So we can't compare the situation to anything else that anyone has experienced, right? Because nothing of this sort has happened in the last 100 years. So this is a new situation. So one thing that parents have to understand is children are very resilient. And including adults are very resilient. When you're going through this, it's a normal response to be anxious, to be worried, and to be stressed out. It is a normal response to a stressful situation. And this is not a normal stressful situation. This is not like a cyclone where you cannot go out and you have a power cut for a few days until people fix it. It is a pandemic where the whole world is affected. And at a different intensity, the damage and the devastation has happened. So adults being stressful, anxious, worried is normal. And similarly, children also, because they're not able to comprehend completely, and also they're locked inside their homes, they're missing their natural play environments where they need explorative play, creative thinking, come up with solutions in the midst of a natural play environment. During their outdoor play. Also, they're also missing on their social skills, socializing with peers, all the regular tumble, the fighting, all of those things children are missing. Children are also missing their regular schooling, going to the school, the structure of getting ready, the parent drops, being in the school, interacting, and then coming back. All their routines also have been disrupted. So children will show some amount of anxiety, irritability, and some amount of behavioral issues, which may be a little more higher than their usual baseline. There is nothing to worry about it because anxiety, stress, and is common during such a kind of a pandemic. So most adults, most human beings in general are very resilient. Most people will come out of it and will adapt and survive. But having said that, there will be some kind of an adjustment issue till things settle down, till things, fall into place, and people would take some adjustment process. But for most people, they're very resilient. Human race in general is very resilient. However, there will be a section or a group of people, a section of individuals who might require extra help in order to adjust. Those are the people who might not have adequate coping abilities, who might develop some mood problems, post-traumatic stress disorder or a depressive disorder or a severe form of anxiety. In the current situation, if someone is feeling a little moody, someone is feeling a little emotional, upset, anxiety, anger, in the current situation is very normal. Let's not pathologize everything. Now, what do you do when you have these kind of emotions? Talking to someone, taking your breaks for yourself, indulging in something that is relaxing to you, talking to someone who's close to you, developing some social support for you. Examples, parents with special needs, they need to have a group support. Maybe weekly they can do video chats, like a group therapy, like a group support system could be built. So this means that you're not alone. You are along with the sea of people who are facing similar troubles. So this gives you a courage and a confidence that there's so many people are there with me, I will travel along with them. Also understand that when you're going through this, it feels that this is a never-ending thing. Will I become normal? Will my child be able to go back to the situation normally? The answer is yes. When situations settle down, children will adapt. There may be some teething problems, but they will adapt. And if at all a child or an adult is unable to adapt, then definitely we need to think of how else to help that particular individual or child, maybe through counseling. For a child could be behavioral techniques. The teachers also need to help them adapt and adjust. So when you have in fact, the more predictable the routines get, children are going to do better. But however, the predictability and setting of the routines once these things are over should be done in a very gentle manner, not bombarding the child again with, so many things and starting day one with, you need to do this homework, you need to do this activity, you need to go for 3-4 therapies in the first week. That is not the way to do. You need to do a gentle adaptation and take it slowly and monitor the responses of the child, and then help the child, walk along with the child, provide adequate support systems both to the parent and the child.
Very
Thank you.
beautiful, Doctor. Gives some hope in this situation. That is the required hope, actually, that all of us are together in one form or the other. Each one is facing a tough situation. Like you wonderfully said, this is not like a cyclone or a storm where the basic necessities we have been deprived of. It's not like that. And then meeting along in groups or forums and talking in those also helps to share ideas and scenarios. That's very nice. Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Kavita, do you have anything
Very
to add?
important to have
Sorry, Doctor. What was that?
parents are very, very important, and especially for children with special needs, parent support groups are very important. That is still missing in the Indian scenario, not as robust as the West. Although I see informally people talking, to their small selected groups, but I think this can be streamlined. This can be structured better. And when you tell parents that, okay, weekly we have this 2-hour session for parents whoever want to come, they can meet online. That gives them a vent towards their frustrations, give them a stress release. Also, they can take ideas from other parents, and that will get them through.
Thank you. Priya, I have a few more questions adding to that.
Veeraja, just a minute.
Yes.
Parents or the team who are attending, you can post your questions in chat box. So if time permits, we will definitely take up them, or otherwise we will make an attempt to answer them through mail or through chat, whatever it is possible. So whoever has questions, please post them in chat box. Yes, Veeraja, you can take further.
Next question is about the gadget addiction. The parent asks how to address gadget addiction in children due to prolonged stay at home, and how sometimes my child uses abusive language, gets irritated, and spends more time with gadgets to be away from everything. So how to cope with that, how to help the child? Am I audible?
Yeah, I got the question. Addiction is it's a loaded word. It's very easy for parents or teachers to say this child is addicted with gadgets. That's a very loosely used term. Addiction is a different intensity altogether. We have to talk about gadget use, gadget excessive use, and that might lead to gadget addictive behaviors. So first of all, because children are at home, they're seen with gadgets for a long time. So it can seem as if it's addiction per se. But we need to understand in the current situation, children can't go out, nowhere to go. In the complete lockdown process, it is very normal and natural for them to spend extra time on gadgets. That is one. Second thing, we also need to adapt to the new normal, like how we are adapting to the new normal. Such a kind of forums never happened. This is there were always physical meetings and physical conferences. So now through the gadget, just like we are communicating, children are also communicating with their peers, with their uncles or with their grandparents. They're forming connections, and this is a mode of communication that they're able to use due to the pandemic has brought on this need to be utilized. So they're doing that. In addition, of course, they're also utilizing it for chats and, playing video games, mobile games, and a lot of other things. Unless the situation improves, unless there are other things that the child can do, example, going to school, which occupies half a day, and there are sports classes, or the child can go in the park, go to the park every day for 2 hours, or there are some kind of classes, their gadget use is going to be more. Let us accept that. And the other thing that we need to think about is when they're using excess, we need to give them a bit of a leverage. Now we can't say you can't touch the gadget beyond 2 hours. 2 hours is your time limit. For an older child, I'm talking about. We can't say that. Let's talk about what should be the normal gadget use. And based on that, we need to drift a bit and give them some leverage during the pandemic time. And if you look at American Association of Pediatrics recommendations, below 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, ideally it should be zero gadget time, especially 18 months to below 18 months to 2 years, no gadget time. However, you see parents unknowingly, you want to make the child happy. They, okay, look at this on the mobile phone, and they put it in front of a 8-month or even a 14-month-old child. Look at this, and the child starts laughing. The child starts laughing. You think the child is enjoying the phone. So you give it at 2 years, you give it at 3 years, and then slowly you're introducing gadgets unknowingly at a very young age. And I'm saying this because there are a lot of parents on the panel. Below 2 years, if children are introduced to gadgets, it impairs their speech development. It's a very important part of the development happens during in those young minds. So there is data showing that speech delays could be caused. So that is one. Now, children above between 2 and 5, they can have 1 hour, as per the recommendations, 1 hour per day. And 6 and above, of course, can go higher, but with consistent limits and regulation by parents. Teenagers, of course, use a little more. So we need to understand what is the age of the child and what are the norms. But in the pandemic situation, we need to relax. Let's say a 7-year-old child is using it for 2 hours. There's nothing to get so hyper about it. And a teenager using a lot more time. We have to relax the norms because but that does not mean their biological rhythm is completely disrupted. If your teenager is sleeping at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the night, up all night, waking up at 12 o'clock, and sleeping throughout the day, that's a total disruption. So engage in it. If it is a typically growing child, let me put this, till 10 years of age, I think the parent completely regulates the cat. Below 7 years of age, it's extremely easy because they can do coloring, drawing, reading books, stories, a lot of other things. And they're also in a playful mode with the parent. 7 to 12, also parent has a pretty good control because they're still in a listening mode and they still have some amount of fear. You can control the gadget by taking it away or putting it in the cabinet and locking it, which most parents do. Now, 12 and above, especially when you come to the preteens and teenage years, children are not going to listen. They throw tantrums, anger, aggression, and all of that. So here, if it is a typically growing child, you enter into negotiation. You have to come up with some agreements like this is the plan. What is the plan? And what are you expecting? How many hours are you allowing? It cannot, and be very clear with them, it cannot interrupt their biological routine. It cannot interrupt their hobbies. It cannot interrupt other things. And now that they're at home, they also need to be helpful to parents, participate in the home, do some home chores. When it comes to a special child, for a special child, it gets very difficult. Let me take the example of a child with autism spectrum. These children get very obsessed about certain videos, certain movies, and they're also obsessed about music. So they insist on using the gadgets over and over, more in a repetitive manner. So for such special children, you can still limit the time, but if it is in their vicinity and very visible, they will still engage and fight for it. Now that they also do not have schools and there's nothing else to engage, maybe we need to relax a bit, but make sure sleeping, eating, other activities, all those things are in place. May not be perfectly, but they should not be interrupted to a maximum extent. Now coming to the gadget addiction, who are those children who are more prone to gadget addiction? There could be an underlying problem that can lead to gadget addictive behaviors. There could be an untreated ADHD, which can lead them to gadget addiction. There could be an learning problem or academic problem, which they're trying to avoid because studying is hard. I would rather play a mobile game or a video game, which is nice, which feels good. Those are the children. And also children with low self-esteem, children with depression, children with social anxiety disorder, or even children want to avoid some family stress or some kind of a commotion or a conflict that's happening with the parent or more spending towards gadgets. So we need to look at all of these things to understand these addictive behaviors. So as a parent, what can you do? The first thing is a parent has to role model. As Dr. Kavita mentioned, it all comes, she said it beautifully. I'm explaining it in a big paragraph. She said it all comes down to the parent. So as set yourself as a role model. So if you're telling, and also if you're saying that you cannot use gadgets throughout the day, what is the parent doing? If you're waking up with your phone and looking at all your chats, your child also might do it. So you need to be a role model, one. Second, as I was telling earlier, the routines, predictable routines, and also technology-free zones in the house. Example, eating lunchtime, dinner time, no gadgets. No one should bring your gadgets to the dining table. So make some technology-free zones like that. Now, other thing that they can do is charge your phones outside of the room. If your child is inside the room and you're charging there, of course, the child will be tempted to use it more. Okay, remove the phone from the charger and then play again. So charging can be outside. Also, to dedicate some time. By this time, nobody's using the gadgets. Example, maybe by 10 o'clock or whatever time for older children, they need to give the gadget back to the parents because some of the children cannot self-regulate themselves, especially children with ADHD. So you need to put a timeline saying that by this time you need to hand over the gadget to me. So that could be done. And what should the parents be worried about? Watch out for signals, sleeping routines, eating routines. Is he not doing other activities? Does your child look a little dull, or the laziness that they were talking about? So what is happening with your child? Inculcate hobbies, whatever hobbies. Typically growing children, it's easier in the terms that, some of the older children can engage themselves. Some of them are coming up with creative writing. Some of them are doing YouTube channels. Some of them are doing content writing, editing music, all of that. In a special child, again, here the parental responsibility is a lot more. In a special child, again, the parent becomes the supervisor for the child. Parent has to regulate the gadget time. So we need to look at their hobbies, look at what skills they can learn, look at what life skills. In a special child, I would say this is the best time to practice the motor skills that they were having sessions earlier, because self-help skills can really be practiced during this time. And children with neurodevelopmental disorders and developmental disabilities, parents can't have the time. Things have slowed down a bit. So all the things that were taught in therapy sessions can be repracticed during these times. How to bathe, self-help skills, how to eat, and how to their fine motor skills, gross motor skills, everything can be practiced right now. So all these skills also are very much needed. So when you want to cut down the gadgets, you need to think of how else do I engage my child. And also as a family, if both the parents are involved in it and both parents are supporting each other to come up with these activities and to support each other, because ultimately the child needs to know that there is one rule in the house. I can play on my gadget, for hours together. Only when my mom comes, she's taking away my phone. My dad sees it, he's not snatching the phone away from me. So the message should be clear, consistent, and to be enforced by the parent. So this is what I can tell you.
And it's a wonderful advice. Though the irony of the situation is we cannot do away with the gadgets, but still somehow make constructive use of it. Try to help the child make a constructive use of it. So
yes, I think it's that only because of the technology, children are still learning online schooling. Children are able to socialize. They are able to see their grandparents, able to see relatives. Children are communicating. So technology is bringing so many uses. So be a master to the technology. Don't be a slave to the technology.
It's very wonderfully put, ma'am. Very wonderfully put. So we move forward to our next set of questions, which are about grief management. My child keeps asking me, will mom get COVID? Will she die? The fear of loss and the grief, how to manage it? How to help the child manage in such situations when they ask such questions?
See, I'll describe the behavioral part of it, and then Dr. Kavita can explain the medical part of it. Now, it also depends on the child. When you talk about grief and loss, we're talking about ages of the children. Younger children, again, till 5 years of age, do not have the cognitive abilities, do not have the expressive speech and language to understand what is loss, what is death. By 5 years of age, the concept of death is not there. Child has to be around 7 years of age to understand that is permanent. You will not see this person again. So the concept of death is more from 7. So that's the reason why children from 7 and above ask a lot of questions. Grandpa is in the hospital. Will he not come? Will he die? So these kind of questions start from 7 and above. So in younger children, it is pretty easy to manage. Let's say a 4-year-old child, someone got fever, grandpa got fever, he's not moving out of the bed, I heard virus. They're saying this because they're not able to comprehend, they cannot connect the dots, there is no abstract thinking. So younger children, reassure them. What should a parent do? Just reassure them. You will be fine. Mama is here, more than enough for a very
Vireja,
Yeah.
did we lose Dr. Yashaswini ma'am?
Yes. I thought my net connection has a problem. We lost.
So maybe I can just cover up till you get
Please,
back.
ma'am.
Dr.
Sure,
Yashaswini.
ma'am, sure.
Yes, please, ma'am.
Now, all this, I feel that parents should not be talking all the gory details about COVID in front of the children. You know, that's not a conversational issue, all these negative things. And it's not required for a child. So, because children take it very seriously, whatever we say. And we may just be casually talking about somebody who has gone through it or something that is happening around. But children are listening to us, and the impression they form is different from how we take it. So we have to be sensitive about the child's perception also when we sit and discuss things.
Okay, ma'am.
Yashaswini ma'am is here.
Yashaswini ma'am, do you want to add to it anything more for the grief management part of it? Ma'am, you are on mute. Yashaswini ma'am, you are on mute. Please unmute. Yashaswini ma'am, please unmute.
Yeah. So like Dr. Kavita mentioned, there should not be over talk, too much exposure onto the visuals or to the news in the homes of children, because like Dr. Kavita mentioned, it impacts the younger brains a lot more. And also the children in general, because, you know, this is not going to be of help. Learning more about bed situation and oxygen, all of that, it's all very sad news. So this will impact. So cut out the excessive talk, maybe half an hour enough, not in front of the children, like Dr. Kavita mentioned. So I was telling you earlier, for younger children, just reassuring the child, the mama is there for you, is more than enough. They keep coming back to you wanting some kind of a consolation here and there. Just be there, tell them mama is there, more than enough. For older children, 7 and above, they might ask, what symptoms will I get? Will I get fever? Will I have to go to the hospital? Even those children, you tell them that, you know, even if you get it, it's just like a cold, like a small fever, nothing will happen. But don't be dishonest to a child, because some parents, I see them with an older child, they would be telling them, don't even worry, it's not going to touch our family, it's not going to happen at all to you. Dishonest answers won't work, because children are, once they grow, they know what is happening to some extent. So give them answer in a simple manner, reassure them, even if you get it will be simple cold, nothing will happen to you. There are medicines to treat your fever. If they ask you, should not give you leading answers, but if they're asking you about fever, keep it simple. And coming to the teenagers are pretty smart. They know everything. They already Googled. They might give you a lecture on black fungus and yellow fungus right now. So for those children, you need to talk to them at their level. So when a teenager asks you, you can't say, why are you asking me all these questions? Don't talk about it. It won't work for a teenager. So for them, you need to talk almost like a pal level. So for every age group, you need to be age appropriate, language appropriate, simple reassurances for younger children. Also keep them busy and active, less exposure to news, get them involved in home chores, keep them active is what I would say. So it's the grief and loss. This question of the grief and loss, let's say a mother lost a family member when their child is restless, when their child has a pain, and especially.
Dr. Kavita ma'am, can I proceed with the next question?
Sure.
It's like parents want to know for the how to keep our children mentally healthy. Can you give us some advice, some suggestions for the general mental well-being?
General mental well-being. See, again, the family as a unit is important. This is what I feel. The parents should avoid talking negative things about others and stuff like that. Then their child will grow, because the children sit and listen to what the parents discuss, the content of the parental discussion, so there are a lot of things children listen and understand. So if we want to keep them stress-free, we should not fill their heads up with negative thoughts about others or things like that. You know, for example, small little things. We may interpret things about maybe our household help or our neighbors or our relatives, something, but that's our baggage. We should resist from transferring it to our children. It could be about the school. I mean, these are some, of course, Dr. Yashaswini, you would be a better person. I see parents cribbing about the teachers in front of children. Can you imagine how stressful it will be for the child to go to that school, knowing that, because they have been conditioned to think like that about the school and their teachers. So these are some small things which, without realizing, we are generating stress for our children. So I hope these are some of the tips, but I think Dr. Yashaswini would be a better person to tell that. It's what we talk as parents in the house. It is how we look at the world. It's how we look at people. We look at things, how we handle it, which is going to create a stress-free environment for our children. And so we need to be watchful ourselves. Does it answer?
Yes, ma'am. We should not paint the world as a negative place for the child. We should make them aware of where the dangers and the pitfalls, but not overwhelm them with the unnecessary facts and the facts which may actually change.
And also our conversations at home. If we are constantly conversing, if our conversation goes around criticizing other people or criticizing other situations, that can turn out to be quite stressful for the child, because he or she will also learn to view the world like that.
True, ma'am. Through our lens, which we should not do.
True.
True. Dr. Yashaswini, do you want to add to it for the suggestions or the tips for the mental well-being of the child, how we can help?
See, like Dr. Kavita already mentioned, it starts with parents. You parents need to manage their own stress, their own well-being, if you want your child to be stress-free and if they have to be emotionally stable. So this talks about parent themselves being aware of what is going on with them. Because a lot of times, given what we were all discussing, there is a tremendous load, in fact, an overload right now to parents. There are some, especially working parents, both working, taking care of the homes, doing chores, and taking care of children. So this is a lot of work. And especially for women, definitely all over the world, the women's load has increased. So this can create a lot of stress within a mother. So very, very important for a parent to have a me time to manage their own stress and to manage their own well-being. So they need to create some time. They need to have breaks in between. They need to create those breaks, because nobody is going to give, because they need to understand it's an important part of their life and they have to do it in order to serve themselves and their families. So they need to have some time for yoga or some small practice, whatever relaxes them. It could be meditation, it could be yoga, it could be engaging in their own hobby, knitting, whatever, or music. A little time they need to carve out. Of course, for physical activity, we do not have anything right now, but doing the household chores is enough of a physical activity. So this parent needs to start managing their anxiety. Second thing, like Dr. Kavita said, do not translate your own anxieties onto your child. You could be stressed out, and it's very common for parents to get stressed out in front of the children, and children pick up those anxieties. And some parents say that, oh, I always talk to my child very well. You can be talking very well, but children are very smart. They pick up the non-verbal cues from your face and from your actions and from your gestures. So you don't have to say, but your anxiety can definitely spill on. So creating that neutral environment at home is very important. Yes, sometimes stress is very normal. You can get stressed out, but also show your children that you're able to get out of it and not completely dwelling in it. So your child can see you sometimes irritable, you're shouting, but they should also see you, that was just a momentary thing. She got upset. You can even vocalize it. I was upset, I was stressed, but that's over. I'm back. So children should also see that you're moving on and not completely dwelling in that. And this also brings out the mental health of parents, because there are parents who unknowingly, they do not know that they're having an anxiety problem or they're having depression within themselves, because they could be unidentified. There's no screening that is usually done for parents unless they bring their child to a specialist. But parents also need to be watchful. Am I getting too anxious? Is this something that I'm able to manage? If they're able to manage, it's fine. If they're not able to manage, they should be open about seeking help, because that in turn helps them and also their families. So if you want your child's anxiety to be under control, it starts with the home, it starts with the parent, how you're managing, and then you can manage your child's anxiety. However, in some cases, children can have phobias. And especially these days, I'm seeing some children where in the second wave, the whole families are affected with COVID. So some of these children are developing sleep problems. I can't sleep. Maybe I'll become breathless. What if I need to go to the hospital? This I'm also seeing in older children also. They're having sleep difficulties due to fear of getting reinfected. Their pediatricians are reassuring, no, you're fine now. Everything is fine. But still they are worried about getting reinfected. So we're seeing some sleep difficulties in those children. So in such children, again, you're looking at how to, relaxation techniques in them, how to get them out of their worries, how to neutralize their anxious thoughts. Something like a cognitive behavioral techniques is what we use. And we can also help parents utilize the same techniques at home in how to help their children reduce their fears. See, we're not looking at erasing the fears. We are talking about managing stress and managing anxiety and fears. As long as the pandemic's there, some amount of worry, some amount of fear will be there. As long as we are all able to function, managing our daily routines, child is able to manage functionality and routines overall, there is no worry. But if anything that is disturbing the daily functioning, definitely that needs help.
Thanks. Actually, you answered the next questions that I was about to ask, which were listed, that about sleeping disorder. My daughter has difficulty sleeping at night. She's either restless or angry or sleepy the next day. So that was the next question I was about to ask, but you have beautifully answered it already. Do you want to add anything else to it, or shall we move forward?
See, sleep problems are very common in children. We are seeing this since the pandemic, extremely common. Most parents are having trouble. This is also because understand that the routine is gone, and also maybe your dinner times have changed. Maybe earlier, that next day there is school and maybe you're on time, but now there's no school, things are a little laxed at home, so maybe the dinner is shifted, then the whole thing shift. Maybe you watch news or watch some show, then lights off at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. Your child, although you want your child to sleep in the other room, is hearing what show is going on here, is hearing what parents are talking about, and there, as long as there is stimulation, light, sound, your child will have difficulty sleeping. If you want your child to have good sleeping habits, you need to maintain good sleep regimens. Good sleep regimen is making sure in the night there is less stimulation. Don't play with too much actively with the child in the night, because it will make them even more hyper. No videos or no stimulatory activities in like digital on digital devices 1 or 2 hours before the child sleeps. Have a soothing music, lights off. Prepare the child, slow down the activity before before they go to bed. This is what you have to do in younger children. And so prepare the sleep rituals, like reading a story or a soothing music and talking to them, tucking them in bed. So it should be relaxing. There should be rituals and also sleep routines, like same time of the day, more or less. It's not like weekends you're leaving the child and Monday to Friday you want them to sleep well. That does not work with children. And with older children sleep little late. As they're growing, automatically their sleep times get shifted. And we often see this with teenagers, and adolescents sleep, in fact, better more towards the later parts of the night, and they go a little deeper. And I think you can ask Dr. Kavita, there's some relationship of the sleep with the growth hormone as well, more towards the later part. So with teenagers, if you're asking them to sleep by 9 and 10, it doesn't work. But give them a leverage, maybe an hour or an hour and a half, and don't get into conflicts in the night, because you're starting off with some arguments. You didn't have time throughout the day because you're busy with household chores, you're busy with a lot more work, and then you got time to talk to your child, to list out all his negative problems and to list out all the fights, all the things that he did not do. Of course, the child will not have sleep, and it ends in an argument, and it leaves, the whole peace is gone. And then the child does not get up in the morning, and then again, you're struggling to help him get out of bed. So make sure all these things are addressed.
Yeah, that we should not carry our anxieties, our loads to the bed. And the same thing, we should help the child understand and learn. With this, we have almost come to the last question, and we take the remaining chat questions. The last one is how to manage anger issues in my child during these days. Like, by now you are told how to engage them with various activities, age-wise, how to engage them, tell them the schedules of each parent and what extra activities they can do, how they can manage their screen time. And all those things may help them with their anger issues. Along with that, is there anything else that we can do?
Anger, dealing with anger.
Yes.
Is that what you're asking? Dealing with anger issues?
Yes, ma'am. Anger issues. Yes.
Okay. As I said, I think if you really screen the population right now, most people are irritable, let me tell you. So when there is some amount of stress, when our routines and things that we're supposed to do and are not being done, and when we're overloaded, some become irritable, some become angry, some can become sad. It's a way of expression. So to the response of the stress that we are facing right now. So adults are facing the same thing with children. So compared to their regular levels of behavior, some of the behavioral problems have increased since the lockdown. We are seeing children throwing more tantrums, more anger, more irritability, sleep problems, all of these things. So now when you're saying anger problem, if this anger has always been there, or if this anger has worsened since the lockdown, these are two different things. And anger difficulties all along. We are looking at the root of the problem. That means, why is this child angry? Or are we calling this anger problem as an anger problem, but it could have been something else? So we need to and who are the children who express anger? Maybe children with, children with expressive speech and language delays. They can't communicate, so they can throw tantrums and become angry. Or our children who are able to talk also can become angry when they know that the environment is conducive and I can control, and my mom gets very fearful when I shout. So I use my anger to control her. And the other thing that children do is, if they want something desperately, they throw a fit and a tantrum to get it. So how are they using their anger? What is triggering their anger? What have you tried as a parent? So have you, first of all, understand where this is coming from. When is your child using the anger? Take a chart, 30 days. Plot out the anger days. Do you see any relationship? What happened before the child got angry? What is the child doing when she's angry? How did the child pacify? So when you look at this for a whole month, you will understand some kind of a commonality and a pattern in the anger. Then you modify the triggers. So that is one method. And also, how are you handling your handling of the anger? So each time when the child is throwing anger, if you're paying a lot of attention, dialoguing with a child who is tantruming, then the anger is not going to go away. In fact, the child will throw more anger to seek your attention. So we need to look at anger in these multiple forms. However, if the child is extremely aggressive, throwing, hitting, pushing, self-biting, very, very aggressive to himself and others, this is not a normal anger. This is not a normal tantrum. This definitely requires professional help.
understand from where the anger is coming, the root cause we should be able to find out. Seek professional help if we are unable to handle this on our own. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Indu, with this we come to the last listed question. So, do we have the
answer? We do have some questions in chat where the parents have asked. Yashaswini ma'am, this is a parent who has asked, like, my kid is 2.5 years old and my concern is it okay to make my kid interact with us at home only, and how to make him improve his developmental delays at home?
Can you repeat the question again?
Kid is 2.5 years old and his concern is mainly that is it okay to make my child interact with us at home only, and how to make him improve his developmental delays at home. If the parent who has posed this question can unmute themselves and ask Yashaswini ma'am,
what we're saying, see, this is a very common question that is coming up from children with special needs, because a lot of them have lost out on their therapies because therapy centers have been closing and opening based on the situation. And also younger children, when you detect a delay, the first thing that you have to do is definitely you can get an online consultation. There are online therapists available. They can guide what you should be doing, because now physical sessions are not happening. So in a very young child, if you're seeing a delay, get some help online, get some guidance. And also what does a young child require? A lot of stimulation. So the parental involvement needs to be more. Talk to the child more language, more people sit with the child, play with the child. Basically, you need to look at the child, sit with the child, play with the child, observe the child. So more, put on music, imitation skills. All these things can be done with the child. Imitation, put the rhymes, make the child repeat. If the child is showing some actions, you imitate those actions. Basically, this is all stimulating the child. And over and beyond, the parent is asking, can developmental delay be addressed at home? The question is, the most important thing that parents have to think of under the current situation is, parents have to look out for regression. So we're seeing some children who have already learned skills, but they are regressing because of lack of stimulation and because of lack of other therapies which they're so used to, and there's no development further. But in a small proportion of children, they're losing whatever they've learned. So watch out if there is any regression. Consult professionals if you worry about that the child lost out a skill. They can guide you on how to go about it. Whereas for the other children, keep the environment stimulatory, not just on your devices. Take breaks from your work, check on your child. Younger children require more of your participation, more of your involvement, and read stories to them, play music to them, talk to them, gesturing. And when they're playing rhymes, be with them, try to make them imitate, do all of this, and also get guidance from professionals online.
Okay, ma'am. I think the answer would be same for these two questions also. So one of the parent has asked, like, as of now, due to COVID, no social communication is happening. They are getting introverted. So what would you like to say on this, ma'am?
See, introverted is not a word that we use for young children. For children, in fact, that is more of an adult. We use the word introvert for adults. We don't use it for children and teenagers, because children are developing. Their personalities keep changing. You see a very quiet child in childhood, and by the time they go to middle school, they're very different. By the time they're a teenager, they're very different. And when you see them as adults, oh my God, you were like this in your childhood. So children keep changing. Their personalities and development continues to develop. So we can't brand children extroverted, introverted, right, wrong that way. So now, yes, social communication is missing. Yes, because children learn social competencies, social and emotional competencies in the natural environment, which is the playgrounds. They have to know how to get on to talk with three children, Out of when they're playing with 3 children, they'll kick them out. They need to go back the next day, somehow find their place and get into the group. One of the child may say, okay, you can't play with us. The child keeps crying and coming back to home. Mother has to send. So all these skills of tolerating different children, tolerating their way of speaking, not letting them play, how to navigate all these social competencies only in an unstructured environment, in a play environment. So that is what this parent is asking. That kind of social skills are not happening. Do not worry about it. Think of this time that you have the maximum time with your children. This time you are not going to get. This is a lot of parenting. There was no parenting happening earlier because everyone is so busy. So you will remember this time. Your child also will remember this time. Papa, you spent so much time with me. I remember those days when pandemic happened. This would go into history. All of us will move on. So do not worry. Children are very adaptable. Children are very resilient and they are quick learners. You put them back into a stimulatory environment, they will go forward.
That's excellent explanation, ma'am. As you said, children are very resilient. The thing is, adults have to get resilient, bounce back regarding that. There is another question from one of the parent named Santosh. He's asking, my son is almost 9 years old and never shows interest in any of the games. Even when we ask him to read or write, he never shows interest, but always asks for some kind of rewards. That is SCV or mixture. One more question is, whenever the entire family is sitting in one room, enjoying the conversation of even sitting on the top of the home or in the evening, enjoying a cup of tea or coffee, during that time also, he never sits with us. Yes, ma'am. Entire family, the child never sits with us. He always moves away from us. Can you please help us how to make him to join us and enjoy the company of family members? This is the question from Santosh. The child is 9 years old.
See, this is coming from a 9-year-old. It's a little surprising. 9-year-old, right?
Yes, ma'am, 9-year-old. He has specifically said he is 9 years old. Yeah.
This is a little surprising. This is very, very common. This is very common from 12. Earlier, it was common for 16 and above. Then it came to 14 and above. Then it came to 12 and above. Now maybe we are going down because from 12, 13 and above, children not sitting with parents, and it's okay. 14 and above, they want a little bit of privacy. They want to do their own things. Less and less with parents, which is again a normal part of adolescent development. Don't expect your 15-year-old to always tag along with you, watch all the shows with you. That's not going to happen because their identity is forming. So they are developing independent opinions. In a teenager, it's normal. Now in a 9-year-old, it is happening. We need to step back and think, what is happening here? Why? Is the 9-year-old worried that you will start giving lectures? Is the 9-year-old worrying, you're asking about why didn't you study? Did you do your homework? There is something that the child is avoiding. Is the 9-year-old avoiding parent? Which parent is avoiding? Why is he avoiding? Is he avoiding to talk with you because you are bringing out, let's say he wants to come and watch a show with you. You are asking, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you didn't do that. Of course, the child does not want to sit with you. So if you are a 9-year-old is not wanting to be with you, you need to look at the environment. Because there are some parents who would tell me, oh, absolutely, my child is absolutely fine with outside. The minute the child comes home, he hates everybody. So then we are looking at the environment. Because what in the environment is triggering the child. So understand, you need to be very self-reflective, introspect on why your child is not sitting with you. Is he avoiding talking with you, or does he not like your instructions? Does he not like your lectures? Does he not like you to talk negatively about him? Or maybe he's upset that you're telling your relatives he doesn't do this, or telling aunts he doesn't do that. So there could be a lot of other things, underlying things. So unless we unravel this, like it's a lot of parents ask me, can you tell me what is in my child's mind? There's no screwdriver to open the child's mind. We just have to understand why the child is doing a particular thing day by day. I tell them it's like peeling the layers of the onion. You need to peel off one layer after the other, and then you will understand what the child does. So I would suggest this parent to step back, understand, look, observe, listen, watch. You get a lot of data.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much for that. And ma'am, there is another question from a parent called Tej. He's asking, my son is 12 years old and he starts smiling when somebody cries at home, which I found weird. I told him many times, but situation is not improving. What should I do as a parent?
Sorry, what is not improving?
The crying part, I mean the laughing. I'll repeat the question, ma'am. The child is 12 years old and he starts smiling when somebody cries at home, it seems. So the parent has found it weird and he has told him many times not to do so, but the situation is not improving. So he's asking help, like what should I do as a parent?
Okay. Okay, got it. So now we have to look at if it is a typically developing child or a special child. Now, if it is a special child, a child who is having some amount of developmental delays, the child is not understanding what is appropriate for the situation. Something like a social skill delay. Children with these children are not picking up the social cues. So when this happens, I'm not supposed to exhibit my laughing because that is not what is expected in that particular environment. This is more of a social behavior, ability to pick up a social cue. And children with social skill deficits cannot pick up this cue. So it could be one of those kind of problems. Let us say the child does not have any delays, is perfectly all typically developing child, can understand everything, understands the social situations. Such children, if they are engaging in such behavior, do not pay attention to it. So if the child does it, you're saying, don't do it. Next, child does it, don't do it. Do it, don't do it. So it's nicely playing a game with you. So what should you do? You should not pay attention. Don't correct them. Don't pay attention. Sometimes the more attention you pay to negative behaviors, you are unknowingly reinforcing the negative behaviors. Keep a watch on that.
And there is another question from Jay Lakshmi. She is asking like how to teach social communications to a kid who belongs to ASD. Social communication.
How to teach an ASD child?
A social communication, ma'am. Yeah.
Social communication, like I answered earlier. Yeah, like I answered earlier. Right now, and what should parents do? Children, your has learned certain amount of skills. Strengthen those skills. They may not learn a lot of new skills at this present time. Let's be realistic. Let's have the goals very realistic. The most important thing is to make sure whatever skills they have, they're continuing, whatever activities they have learned, do those, whatever practices, whatever sessions this child had with the behavior ABA therapist, with the speech therapist, OT therapist, you must have already gotten some guidance. Repeat and rehearse those for the time being. Because in children with ASD, it's important to keep these repetitions going. So for now, your goal will be repetition, maintaining the skills that the child has already learned. Whatever your therapist guided, continue with those. So don't worry about further progress, but for further progress, you will need the professional's help. You will need the therapist's help. Because the goal setting has to be different. So professional has to assess what is the level of the child, and we need to add another goal. So as a parent, I would suggest whatever your child is doing, keep doing it. And whatever you have learned from therapists, with their guidance, keep doing all those things so that the sustenance, so whatever skills are learned are remaining and the child is not losing. Let's be very realistic right now and wait for some time till things settle down so that the child can move on to physical sessions.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So parents, if to this we come to an end of questions which we got through the chat. Parents, if anybody is interested to ask any question from your side, ma'am, can we take it? One or two? Is it okay with you?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah. Parents, if you have any questions, please come on mic and you can just ask Dr. Yashaswini ma'am.
Yashaswini ma'am, this is Santosh here again. I'm a parent for a 9-year-old son who is on autistic spectrum. He is your patient as well. Okay. We visited you in the year of 2011. It's almost 10 years. Nice to see you again. I have a question actually. Sorry, in 2016. Sorry, I see you in 2016. I have one question. Okay, in last 1 year, like you might have observed, right? All the kids, including normal kids and special kids, they're all using the online classes, right? You might have observed, right? Special kids don't have that much patience to look at the TV and grasp what is being told in the TV or laptop through online education. Ma'am, question to you, ma'am, 2 questions to you, okay? Ma'am, since you are at such high level in the Bangalore society and also having lots of reach to almost all the special education institutes, would you mind instructing them to open many such schools across Bangalore so that all the special kids across Bangalore can at least have one special school in their area? Because let me tell you, in my area, in Electronic City where I stay, there are none inclusive schools, not even one, and I have to travel at least 15 kilometers in order to take at least one special education school. That's the issue which I'm facing, ma'am. Since you have got that much reach across institutes, right, I request you to ask any of the institutes to start one school in Electronic City or across Bangalore, which can help all the special parents just like me. Sorry, ma'am, I got one last question. Okay, how can I improve my children's sitting behavior to make sure that he sits in front of laptop and learn what is being taught through online education? Thank you, ma'am, for giving opportunity.
Now, to answer the first question, need lot more manpower. What I'm understanding is, although Bangalore is doing far better, way better than a lot of other cities, when parents ask me, I'm transferring to this city from Bangalore, is it okay? I tell them 3 cities, definitely for sure. Maybe I am biased, maybe I do not know. I tell them Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, because there's good amount of professionals catering to children. However, we are struggling. There are independent professionals, there are independent therapists, doctors, but we are not having adequate special schools. I totally agree with you on that. And the reason is, it is requiring a lot of manpower. We need more trained special educators. We need financially, it's also a huge investment. There are not many. I'm going to be very categorical and honest in giving you this answer, because this is what most people, when I asked the same question, they tell me this. So I'm reflecting their own answer. Okay. So they tell me it's a huge financial investment. And the manpower, training manpower is extreme. We do not find already trained manpower to give them jobs. 3, we have to take people who are not so seasoned, who do not have work experience. And then when we put them to a school, all kinds of problems come up, and then we are closing the schools. I myself know of 3-4 schools which have closed that way. Although the person who started the school is fantastic, knows everything about it, lack of trained manpower, lack of people with a lot of experience is another issue, and financial investment, because it takes huge costs to manage these children. Some children require one-to-one, some children require shadow teachers, and you need to have so much of supervision, including helps and house staff and all of that. So due to all these reasons, there are issues. And the other, even in the West, if you look at the history way back, it all started actually with parents. Its parents were the ones who started a lot more schools, and then it slowly translated to the government level. So, and in fact, I see that in autism happening. There are parents who started autism schools. There are parents, in fact, first residential schools for autism were started by parents, even in Hyderabad, even in Coimbatore, even in Kerala, even in outskirts of Bangalore. They were started by parent associations. So I think first and the foremost, we need a good forum of parent representation where parents meet at regular intervals and then do it. It is not, it's very, just like you, I also always have the same question. How come we don't have special schools? How come why is this parent struggling so much? but this requires a momentum. The numbers that we're talking about, for example, today we have about some participants. This is not enough. If we have to build something in the community, we need a louder voice, we need a bigger momentum. And the last but not the least, in every single meeting, this is my statement. We need collaborations. We are still not collaborating. Like, we have so many people doing excellent work. Unless we have more collaborations, unless people unify and develop their ideas, we can't better our services. Either it is getting more schools on board. Number two, getting services affordable. That is also there. Because some parents tell me that I can't afford the service every single time. So what do we do with that section of people? How do we cater to all sections of people? And how do we also help, these parents? Parents are not supported. It's almost always we're all worried about fixing the child, do this therapy to the child, give this medication to the child, ADHD diagnosis given, I put the child on medication, I'm done. My job is done. I gave diagnosis, medication. I really do not know how is this mother coping. What are the emotional issues that this mother is dealing with? Unless the whole family unit is supported, we cannot make increments. So what I'm trying to tell you is, at multiple levels, the systems have to improve. And it took me so many years to understand this and be able to articulate.
Okay. Ma'am, would you mind helping, how can we make autistic kids to sit in front of laptop and grasp things which have been told?
Now that is coming down to attention span. We have to understand not all children sit. It is plain blanket rule. It does not have to be autism child. Lot of typically developing children that I see, they switch off the laptop. And then the teacher calls the parent, your child is not attending classes, he switched off the camera. This is happening with all children. Let me put it that way. Second thing, also it has been a longer duration, more if they've been at home for such a long time. So again and again, online sessions, children are not interested. Of course, some children are very, very interested only to look at their friends and do a chat in parallel. Now, when it comes to autism children, we know that most children with autism have a comorbid diagnosis of ADHD, most children. So around 40%, if not more, of children with autism have a comorbid diagnosis of ADHD. So there's attention span, distractibility, all of these things are issues. So if we are saying that this child has to sit, what is it that is making the child not able to sit is something that we need to understand. Maybe this child, first of all, online sessions are not for everyone, whether it is a typically growing child or a special child, online sessions are not for everyone. In my experience, most children below 10 years of age are not doing well at all in online sessions. Older children are having fun other than learning lessons, and especially children with developmental disorders, they will have a tough time doing online sessions. I am seeing mothers forcing the child to sit. You have to look at the teacher. She's calling you, and this is not a good model, because these are the children who require almost a shadow teacher, who require a one-to-one teacher, and who require physical classrooms. If you're expecting the child to sit and focus, we have to look at what other condition is interfering. If the child is too hyperactive, is it an ADHD? Should we medicate the child? What are the behavioral interventions? We have to look at the child in this whole spectrum rather than why is my child not sitting? Can I fix it? It is not as simple as one liner.
Got it, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Dr. Kavita, ma'am, we have one question regarding the vaccination here. So the parent has said, we have recovered from the COVID on May 20th. Can we take COVID vaccination now, or should we wait? If so, for how many days? It's their question, ma'am.
If it's usually 3 weeks, though the government of India says 3 months, but across the circles, the medical circles, and in other countries, you need to wait for 3 months from the day of the first